Now I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker for day two. I'd like to welcome Brewers Association President and CEO Bob Pease. As you know, the Brewers Association is the national trade association representing small and independent American craft brewers. The US craft brewing scene has long been an inspiration for, I'm sure, everyone in this room. And our own association, the Independent Brewers Association, has increasingly worked with the Brewers Association to benefit from their experience, their long experience supporting their brewing industry. And we're very privileged to have Bob travel all of this way to speak to us and share some of his learnings and some notes of encouragement and from their experience in the US. So thank you, Bob. I'd like to welcome Bob Pease.
Good morning. Good morning. How's everyone doing? Good. All right. I'm really super psyched, super excited to be here with everyone. Second time in Australia for me. First time to the Gold Coast. Wow, what a beautiful spot. I think I could live here. This morning I'm going to speak a little bit with all of you about who the Brewers Association is, what some of our programs and activities are, talk a little bit about the American craft brewing community, where it's come from, where it is, where it might be going, and maybe there's some things in my presentation that, hopefully you can maybe learn from what the Brewers Association has done well, but maybe also learn from what the Brewers Association has done not so well. So we've certainly made our mistakes. In the United States, craft is now entering into its 5th decade. Hard to believe. And in the United States in 1980, there were around 40 breweries total. And fast forward 43 years to 2023, now we have over 9,400 small and independent craft breweries. Let's get started, shall we? All right, it's a little video to kick things off, to spark the energy, spark everyone's creative juices this morning. Big shout out to all of my friends back in our creative department at the BA who put that together for me and make me look really, really good. I want to start by giving a shout out and a thank you to Kylie and to Richard for inviting me here to be with you all this morning and to speak to you about the BA. I've got one of the best jobs in the world. I get to travel all over the world to speak to groups like you about beer. Pretty good gig, right? And I also need to give a special shout out to my good mate, Chris Swersey, who I think I see over there in the room, who has made the move to live down under. Seems like the transition's treating Chris very, very well. Chris we worked together over 20 years, and it was his work, his dedication, his integrity that really built the Great American Beer Festival competitions and the World Beer Cup competition into what they are today. So, morning, Chris. So, here's the Brewers Association. it didn't always used to look like this. I started at the association in 1993 as the customer service manager, and I've had the privilege to work there for over 30 years. But here you see some of the programs, projects, and activities that the BA is engaged in. At our core, we're a membership organization. So we have 5,600 craft brewery members. We also have 35,000 members of the American Home Brewers Association, which is an important and very relevant connection that I'll speak a little bit more in a few slides. We have about 1,300 allied trade or supplier members, many of them on the trade show floor here at this conference. And we also have 400 distributor members. Important to note here about the association are our events. And why I point those out is because it's the events, the Great American Beer Festival, the Craft Brewers Conference, the World Beer Cup, that serve as the economic engine for the association. And those, in turn, hopefully, generate a surplus that allow us to develop programs and activities up here. Government affairs, statistical data, diversity, equity, and inclusion, technical resources where Chris used to work, and then hopefully those programs, those benefits spur breweries to join the BA. So it's an important distinction, an important connection there between the events and then the programs and activities that we fund on behalf of our members. We publish 2 magazines, publish Zymergy for the home brewers, and we publish The New Brewer for our professional brewing members. And then we also publish books under our publishing arm, Brewers Publications. So again, we're pretty robust. We've got a full-time staff of 55. We're based in Boulder, Colorado, and we have people working remotely for us in Washington, D.C. as well. But again, it didn't always used to look like that. It looked a lot different in 1978 when the association was founded. Governance-wise, we're structured to be an organization of brewers and for brewers. So that means that we are governed by a board of directors that is elected by the membership. Our membership classes select and vote for their directors in their relative business class. So what that means is if you're a production brewery, which is a brewery that packages the majority of their beer into bottles, cans, or kegs, you vote in the production brewery class. If you're a pub brewer, brew pub operator, owner-operator, you vote for the pub brewers. And then if you're a taproom brewery, you vote for the taproom members. There's our current board chair, Garrett Marrero from Maui Brewing. Unfortunately, Garrett's heavily involved right now in supporting relief efforts for all the people on Maui. Just a horrible, horrible situation there. But Garrett's a community leader and has been heavily involved in the relief efforts. Garrett's term as board chair expires in February. Our board chairs are put in office for 2 years, and he will be succeeded by our vice chair, Leah Cheston, right there from Right Proper Brewing in Washington, D.C. She'll take over as board chair in February. She'll become the second woman to lead the Brewers Association, following in the footsteps of Kim Jordan, who was one of the instrumental founders of the BA. From the board level, we filter down to the committee level. Every committee is chaired by a member of the board of directors. That's how you get brewery members to do work. Because at our board meetings, every board member who chairs one of these committees has to give a report. And if they're not doing anything, it comes across pretty quickly. So we're really, really fortunate in that we have robust engagement from members of all different membership classes, business models, and they staff the committees. So you have a board member chairing the committee. The committee is populated by brewery members, owners, brewers, marketing directors, various levels of expertise. And then each committee has a staff liaison that kind of functions between the committee, people who want to come up with all these great ideas for the staff to do work. The staff says, hell no, we're not doing that. And then there's a nice equilibrium that works out pretty well. One comment I would have for this room is get involved with your association to the extent that you can. The IBA is only going to be as strong as everyone in this room. And that's how that would be one takeaway I would offer, is that the BA has been very, very fortunate to have so many members give back. And I have such respect for the men and women that serve on our board and serve on our committees, because the time that they put forth, it's not insignificant, but it really, really, really makes a difference. So that would be one message I would share with this room. So you can't know where you're going if you don't know where you came from. So we're going to spend a few minutes here just taking a little look back about the Brewers Association, how we started, and it wasn't the Brewers Association. When I first started working there, it was called the Association of Brewers. And you need to know where you've come from in order to get to where you want to go. But it's very, very important to stay in touch with your history, stay in touch with your roots. And again, one thing I think is really important for this room to take away is craft brewing into its 5th decade now in the United States. We're not the new kid on the block anymore. And in many cases, we're not the shiny rose. Things have changed. Things are harder. The days of double-digit growth for all of our members pretty much seem to be gone. So we're going to have to find new ways to reinvent ourselves, to stay relevant, to become more relevant, to find new opportunities, new strategies, new occasions to attract that new customer into craft. The Association of Brewers started in 1978 by Charlie Papazian as the American Home Brewers Association. So that's Charlie right there. And lower left, right there, kind of cut off, is Michael Jackson, the famous beer writer from London, the beer hunter. That's Fred Eckhart, Portland, Oregon, another founding member of the homebrewing community in America. And why this is important, and why this is relevant still today, is because in 1978 and 1980 in the United States, there was no beer culture. Like here, man, I'm super impressed with the beer culture I've experienced in my few days here in Australia. In 1978, 1980 in the United States, 40 breweries, and beer was an industrialized commodity, and there was one beer style, industrial light lager. Homebrewers awakened America's beer taste buds and were the building blocks of building beer culture in America. In the late 70s, early 80s, you had a group of people that travel around the world. They go to the great beer drinking nations of, the UK, Germany, Belgium. They experience, meaningful, wonderful, integrated beer culture. And then they come back to the United States, and what do they find? Wonder Bread and craft cheese singles and Schlitz. And they're like, yo, there is more to life than this. And so that global travel and awakened America's beer taste buds, and it was the homebrewers that really helped develop beer culture in the United States. The other thing that happened was mainly the first craft breweries that opened in the United States, and they weren't called craft breweries then, they were called microbreweries. It was the brew pub that was really the preferred business model at the start. And why that's also important is because brew pubs served as that community gathering place where people went to experience beer culture that prior to 1978, 1980 did not exist. So homebrewers, travel, brew pub, beer culture. The 1980s. Some of the seminal leading American craft breweries had their roots in homebrewing, particularly Sierra Nevada. That's Ken Grossman and his crew in this photo, and also Fritz Maytag and the crew at Anchor. That connection really, really helped fuel American beer culture. Today, Brew pub's still very popular in the United States, but now it's the tap room that has emerged as the preferred business model. But the tap room and the brew pub kind of serve that same purpose. They act as that community gathering place where people experience beer culture in its finest. Many people now say America is the best place to drink beer in the world. It didn't used to be like that by a long shot. So, 1990s, this is a great picture of Marcy and Jeff Larson from Alaskan Brewing in Juneau, Alaska. Still very active. Jeff has been a longtime member of the technical committee of the Brewers Association. Another example of being involved in your organization. I want to go back and say Ken Grossman here. Ken was the founder of our technical committee, as Chris could attest to. And Ken served on our board of directors for 9 years. So gave back immensely to the success of the association. When you get the leaders of your community giving back and leading by example, that is a great foundation for success. One of the things that happened in the 90s was, in American craft brewing, is big upswing, big interest, craft breweries. Maybe there's 1,000, 1,500. But quality issues first reared their head in the 90s. Where all of a sudden it was like, that beer isn't that good. What the heck happened? And so in the 90s, what we saw is what we call the first shakeout of craft. So starts in the 80s, builds all through the 1980s, early 90s, mid 90s. The beer drinkers' first experience with craft was inconsistent. You only get one chance to make a first impression, and many times that first impression was, I'll be generous and say, inconsistent. And so that led to many craft breweries closing, which probably wasn't necessarily a bad thing. And today, in the States, we're starting to see some similarities to that, to what happened in the 90s. We're starting to see some of that today. The 2000s, interesting period again. What was going on here is you had multiple organizations claiming to represent the interests of the craft brewing community. So you had the Association of Brewers, where I worked, based in Boulder, Colorado, founded by Charlie Papazian. We had the Brewers Association of America, a trade association based in North Carolina that only had about 40 or 50 members, but those members were all the leading production craft breweries in the United States. Due to some amazing work by some amazing leaders, led mainly by Kim Jordan, Steve Hindy from Brooklyn, Gary Fish from Deschutes, Nick Matt from FX Matt. They saw the future and said, we need one trade association to represent the collective voice of American craft brewing. A year of negotiation, a year of meetings, and the result was the formation of the Brewers Association in 2005. So you kind of have two real seminal moments in the development of the American craft brewing community. You got the American Home Brewers Association starting in 1978 by Charlie. You have the Brewers Association being formed in 2005. And why that was really, really relevant is that led to the beginning of the Brewers Association political advocacy. Prior to that, we were primarily only a promotional association. In 2005, we formed the BA. Our leaders at that time, Kim, Gary, Steve, Nick, they had a vision. They wanted the Brewers Association to be at the same level as the trade association that represented the large brewers, which is called the Beer Institute, based in Washington, D.C. And that was the job I inherited. In 2009, I was put in charge of our federal government affairs advocacy efforts, and I was told, Bob, we want to be at the table with the Brewers Association. I think it was Richard who talked about yesterday, you need to have a seat at the table. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that in the boardrooms of the Brewers Association. If you don't have a seat at the table in government affairs, you will find yourself on the menu. So get involved, get engaged, develop that relationship with your MP, and it will benefit you, everyone in this room, and all the other breweries that aren't represented in this room. It is that important. We have gone from nowhere in political advocacy starting in 2005 to today. We have the largest single caucus in the United States Congress. The House Small Brewers Caucus is the largest caucus in the United States Congress today. How does that happen? That happens by you as a brewery owner calling up your member of Congress and say, Representative Boebert, I want you to join the House Small Brewers Caucus. Oh, no, sorry, wrong number. But you get the drift. And there's also a Senate Small Brewers Caucus. The chair of the Senate Small Brewers Caucus is Senator Ron Wyden from Oregon. Ron Wyden is the chair of the Senate Finance Committee. He is a very, very powerful man, and he is our friend. And those relationships are just so critical to an association, to an industry that has so many positive stories and so many messages to tell. You guys are entrepreneurs. You're putting it all on the line. You're job creators. You're taxpayers. You serve as the local gathering point for your communities. You're involved in your communities. You have a wonderful story to tell. And I urge you and encourage you and implore you to try to get involved with the IBA and see what you can do to help educate your legislators about the positive contributions your businesses make to your communities. You're going to find a receptive audience. I can remember when I first got, I would call up brewery owners about 2008, 2009 and say, hey, Chris, I want you to come to Washington. I'm going to set up meetings for you, and I want you to tell your story of your brewery in Salmon, Idaho. And the response I got at that time was, Bob, that's the man. I'm not coming to Washington. And they hung up. We've come a long way since then. Now, every year, we engage in what we call a political advocacy day, what we call a hill climb, a fly-in. We bring brewery owners to Washington, D.C. We set up meetings for them with their federal legislators, and we spend the entire day up on Capitol Hill talking, telling our story, educating, sometimes asking for something, asking for a piece of support for a piece of legislation we're supporting, and then we'll host a reception for the members of Congress and their staffs in the evening. Very, very powerful and very, very successful. Quick slide here to just say, again, thinking about that first slide I put up with all the different, potpourri of programs and activities the BA is involved in. It didn't always used to be like that, man. This is what it was like in the early days, okay? That's a volunteer at the Great American Beer Festival. First 10 years were super difficult. Underpaid staff, we relied on volunteers, but we stuck it out. And we persevered, and we found success. In the 2010s, that first shakeout is behind us. The American beer drinker has discovered hops, okay? You could go in the 2000s and the 2010s, you could go into a craft beer bar and listen to the conversations. You could hear people saying, oh, the Simcoe, is really amazing. No, the Amarillo. There was awareness of the beer drinker of the different hop varietals, much like our friends in the wine industry, and it was super powerful to see. It was, and that knowledge, that education still exists today. I've seen read the bios of some of the speakers here this week and noticed a couple of them are certified cicerones. That's the beer, the beer sommelier program started by my good friend Ray Daniels. Ray worked with Chris and I at the association for a decade. But that level of education of the beer drinker, and almost importantly, it's the beer drinker, the retailer and the distributor, has really helped fuel the American craft brewing community. So that's all the good. But with the success that American craft brewing started to have in the 2000s through the 2010s, people like to come knocking when you have success, right? And they like to emulate and see what could they do to maybe get a piece of that. So in 2008, InBev from Brazil purchases Anheuser-Busch. Okay, seems like maybe a fairly innocuous and innocent movement, but not really. Because in 2011, Anheuser-Busch InBev, the new company, ABI, not American anymore, Brazilian owned, they purchase Goose Island in Chicago. And that starts the wave of acquisitions. Now, entrepreneurs in almost every industry start small businesses often with the hope of selling to the largest competitor in their space for economic success, economic freedom, economic security. There is nothing wrong with that. And we do not begrudge anybody who sells their business, their brewery, to a large brewery. But what happened in the 2010s, 2015, 2016, was breweries would sell to ABI primarily. Some sold to Molson Coors. But what AB InBev did in the marketplace was try to still represent those breweries as independent. And I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of the American beer distribution system, but in America, the largest brewer is AB InBev. The largest beer distributor is AB InBev. And that's a problem because they control then what gets on the shelf, what gets on the tap, and you don't have consumer pull anymore deciding what beers are available to the beer drinker. You have what we call supplier push. And that's a problem for small and independent businesses. And so what the Brewers Association did to try to counter that was development of the Independent Craft Brewers Seal. So we started work on that in, I think, 2016, 2015. I think we launched it in 2017. And this is a program that we're still heavily invested in. It's really, really important to us. And the objective there is to give the beer drinker the ability at the point of purchase, primarily in the off-premise and the off-trade, to support businesses that are legitimately independent. Today we have close to 6,000 breweries that have adopted the Independent Seal in one form or another. You do not have to be a member of the Brewers Association to use the Independent Seal. You do have to certify you meet the Brewers Association's definition of a craft brewer, and we see adoption continuing to grow in the U.S. So it is a tool that helps, our members differentiate themselves in the marketplace. It makes no distinction about the quality of the beverage, the quality of the beer, but it does certify that you are independent, and for the beer drinker, for the consumer that wants to support small and independent business, this gives them the opportunity to do so. It's been a very, very successful program for us. It's gotten a lot of media attention. It's been very controversial. We took a lot of grief for the shape of the seal, the upside down bottle. What are you guys doing? Like, I put my beer in cans. I'm not going to put a bottle on my label. What are you, nuts? But it's distinctive. It's held the test of time and has been successful, and it's something we're really, really proud of. Okay. We're going to shift now from the Brewers Association and our programs and our activities and what we're like, and talk a little bit about the state of the American craft brewing community. Most of this data that we're going to run through now comes from what we call our BIPS project, BIPS. That's an acronym that stands for the Beer Industry Production Survey. That work is led by my colleague Bart Watson, and in that we survey every brewery in the United States, and we ask them some fundamental questions. How much beer did you make? How many people do you employ? Are you coming to the Craft Brewers Conference? But anyway, that survey, the Beer Industry Production Survey, is the backbone of the data that we're going to cover in this presentation. All of the data here assumes that breweries that are included meet the Brewers Association of a craft brewer. This is right up there with the seal in terms of controversy, right? We know it's not perfect, but it has served us well, and it allows me and my staff, my team, to know who do we go to work for each and every day. And it's the small and independent craft brewer that meets this definition. That's our yin and yang, that's our DNA. It's those women and men, those entrepreneurs that have risked everything to have a small brewery in their local community. That's who we go to work for, that's who we support. And it's the honor of my lifetime to be able to work with people like that. The median-sized brewer, I don't know what people's perception of the BA in this room is, the median-sized brewer in the United States produces 550 barrels a year. So that's about, 600 hectoliters, I think, somewhere in that neighborhood. The point is, super duper small. The average BA member produces about 4,000 barrels a year. So that number is higher because we have a good number of breweries that do produce a fair bit of beer. But there are only 250 breweries in the United States that produce more than 15,000 barrels of beer a year or more. Everybody else is under that. Today, I think we're using the number 9,456 as the number of breweries operating in the United States. And you can basically slice that 9,000 up into thirds. A third are packaging or production breweries. They're going to tend to be a little bigger. They're going to have more scale. They sell, again, primarily, they sell their beer through bottles, cans, and kegs. We have the pub brewers, or a brew pub operator. We define a brew pub as a brewery that sells the majority of their beer on site and has significant kitchen operations. Yes, it's that clunky. And taproom breweries. Breweries that sell the majority of their beer on site and have no significant food service or kitchen operation. So that's basically what the landscape of the US looks like right now in terms of number of breweries and business models. A third. Average brewery, medium brewery, very, very small. Very local. Well, let's start. It's time to get sober. This is the slide that shows the growth rate of craft brewers since 2013. Up into 2014, double-digit growth for everyone. Party's on, start a craft brewery, get rich. And then reality starts to set in. And then, we're doing okay through here. Things are stabilizing. You're not going to grow double digits forever, but hey, 3% growth, 4% growth, most industries would kill for that on a collective basis. And then COVID hits. And everybody's world changes. For the Brewers Association, that meant we lost all of our event revenue during COVID time. 2 years of no event revenue. We laid off a third of our staff. It was certainly probably the most difficult time for me in my professional career to have to let go close to 30 people who did nothing wrong, but we just did not have the revenues to support that level of payroll. It was the uncertainty, really, right? We didn't know how long COVID was going to last, what the future looked like. So we made some very difficult decisions. But things rebounded. 2021, we go back up to that 8% growth rate. 2022, growth is flat. But what has not come back in the United States is draft business, on-premise draft beer. We are still down 20% from COVID. Bart likes to say there's 2 million barrels of draft beer missing. Anyone seen them? Because we can't find them. And that hits us at our core, because pre-COVID, draft beer is where craft breweries won. That's where we could differentiate between big beer. We had the pour, we had the tap tower, we had the brass, we had the stainless steel, we had beer style glassware, we had the perfectly poured pint, we had romance. And we still have some of that. And we still have it, but things have changed. And, for those of you who travel in the States, late night business in urban areas, gone. Lunchtime business in many urban areas, if not gone, greatly reduced. Prior to COVID, craft brewers sold 30% of the total volume of craft, which is like 25 million barrels. 30% was draft beer. For all beer in the United States, that number is 10%. So it's an issue, it's a problem. There are various organizations, including the BA, trying to address that. But it's really, it's something that's very, very concerning for us, absolutely. Okay, 2022, overall, beer's down 3.1%. This is primarily due to the rise of our friends in the liquor industry. Craft did grow 0.1%. Import beer up 2.8%. Really what you've seen in the United States in the whole beer industry is the decline of volumes from the big brewers, ABI and Molson Coors primarily, the rise of Constellation brands and their beers, Corona and Modelo especially, capitalizing on the demographic shift happening in the United States. So big beer down, losing tons of volume. Craft brewers holding their own, treading water. Mexican imports, the growth vehicle. And at the same time, you've got the rise and now potentially the fall of hard seltzers and the emergence of what we call canned cocktails, which is, as I understand, not a new phenomenon for all those of you in this country, but for the United States, it's very new. And canned cocktails are certainly having their day in the sun right now in the United States. I was very impressed yesterday to hear that independent brewers in this country have 7% of the beer market with only 600 brewers. Give yourself a hand. That is damn impressive. And something you can hang your hat on and something that you can grow. And I love the visionary slides that you guys covered yesterday that shows what the hope is in the future for the IBA. Again, get involved. It doesn't happen automatically, man. It takes everyone in this room rowing together in the same direction. As a good friend of mine once said, together we are heavy. And that's attributed to Sam Calagione from Dogfish Head. So, 13% U.S. market share by volume, pretty darn good in its own right. 25% in dollars. So that means every dollar that's spent in the United States on beer, 25 cents of that, 25% of that, is going to a small and independent craft brewery. Super impressive, super positive. I think I heard yesterday that it might have been Bernard who said the number of craft breweries in the United States is going down. Fortunately, I'm going to have to say he was not correct. The number of craft breweries is still going up. We're now at 9,456. In 2022, we saw 519 openings, 329 closings. That is the lowest number of openings since, I think, 2013. So the number of brewery openings and brewery closings are going to connect probably this year. And 2023 might be the first year ever that we've tracked that there'll be more brewery closings than openings. This slide shows the premiumization shift in beer volume in the United States. This is primarily ABI Molson Coors. Wow. 60 million barrels down. This is the rise of craft. Sorry, there. 25 million barrels now for the craft segment, small and independent brewers. And this is Mexican imports. Now this number includes all imports, from every country, but the vast, vast majority of imports in the United States used to be led by Holland, used to be Heineken. Now it's Constellation Brands and their beers, Modelo, primarily Modelo and Corona. We're using phrases now called like the new normal and a maturing industry to describe when we talk to members of the media or do presentations about what's happening in the American craft brewing community. It's happened a lot, when we came out of COVID, it was like, well, I guess this is the new normal, right? One of the things we're going to talk about is channel shift and no growth. But no growth doesn't mean there's not a lot of things changing at the same time. The American beer community, the American craft brewing industry is very, very dynamic, and there's lots of change happening within this new normal. We need to find ways as an industry, as an association, to bring the majority of our members back to growth. Easier said than done. Focusing on the draft is one tactic, but we need to find, and our brewery owners need to find new innovations, new strategies, new occasions, new customers to come into the craft brewing party, the craft brewing community, so we can get them back to growth again. How can we do that? One great example of a brewery that's done that very, very successfully is Athletic Brewing Company. Everyone in this room heard of them? Non-alcoholic beer, alcohol-free beer. Pre-COVID, America was late to the alcohol-free game, but these guys bet on a new innovation, a new strategy, and they're hitting it big. So other breweries will follow in their footsteps and are doing that. But that's just one example of what we need to see within the United States craft brewing community to bring our members back to growth. Let's talk a little bit about hospitality versus distribution. Distribution is primarily for the breweries that fall into our packaging brewery classification, right? These are the breweries that depend on an independent beer distributor to take the beer from the brewery in the United States to the retailer in the United States, the retailer being the bar, the restaurant, the liquor store, the grocery store. That is the distribution model. And right now in the United States, coming out of COVID, if you're a distributing brewery, you are getting squeezed by your distributor. And this is kind of, again, part of the new normal. But what happened during COVID is the number of SKUs or the number of breweries that a beer distributor wanted to work with or was willing to work with went down. So if you're Sam Adams or Sierra Nevada or New Belgium, you're fine. But if you're a smaller brewery packaging business model and you have 12 SKUs that your distributor partners were selling for you in the off-premise, now they're coming to you and saying, Bob, we're only taking 6 of those SKUs. And you're like, what? And the distributors have the power in the United States beer market. That's where the money is, and it's a challenge. The good side, the good news, is if you're in the hospitality-focused beer industry or have a business model that focuses on the tap room or the brew pub, you are almost assuredly seeing growth. So that's that interplay between hospitality versus distribution. Almost every, I'm sure many of you have traveled to the States, been to breweries, you go to a production brewery, a packaging brewery, they have a tasting room on site that most often is doing great business, and you make a lot more margin and a lot more profit selling beer right over the bar to the beer drinker. But the volume for a production brewery is not going to be in the direct-to-consumer sale. It's going to be in the sale that you sell to your distributors. But if you're a brew pub or a tap room, you're probably doing okay. So in 2022, regional breweries, we define a regional brewery as a brewery that produces 15,000 barrels of beer a year or more. Again, there's only about 300 of those, less than 300 of those. Collectively, they were down 2%. Not bad, but not great. That trend has continued in the first half of 2023. We're probably guesstimating right now that overall craft in 2023 is going to be down anywhere from 2 to 4%. First time ever. Microbreweries, we define a microbrewery as a brewery that produces 15,000 barrels of beer a year or less. They were up 1% in 2022. So not bad. What do we mean by focus on scaling without growth? It means relooking at your business model, your distribution plan, and maybe you've spread yourself a little too far and wide and too shallow, where you need to be more concentrated and deep. So that's one of the things that we're really emphasizing with a lot of our members is think about, it's better to be probably a big fish in the small pond than to be that small fish in a much bigger pond. You get too far afield from your home base, your relevance takes a hit, your quality potentially takes a hit. And so that's what we're seeing a lot of members do now is to retrench, take a relook at that, constrict their distribution footprint, and focus more on what's happening at home. Here's some good news again. Collectively, tap rooms and brew pubs up 7% in 2022. Again, they represent the majority of business models in the craft brewing community, but they don't represent the majority of the volume. Therein lies the rub. Here's a real interesting one. If you're a pub brewer or a tap room brewer and you open 2018 or later, you're finding ways to connect with your beer drinker, with your consumer, with your audience. Maybe that means they're a little more hip on social media. Maybe they know what TikTok is. Maybe they know how to appeal to the younger drinker. But if you have one of those breweries and were open before 2020, in 2018 or earlier, your growth rate is a lot less. Here's the opening and closing slide that I talked about. And you can see that they're about to hit equilibrium. But 529 openings in 2022, 319 closings. These two graphs are going to come together this year. And again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. We are approaching 10,000 breweries in the United States. There are 10,000 wineries in the United States. You don't hear people say, oh, the wine market is saturated. So it's all about the business model. It's all about your location, your engagement, your involvement in the local community. This is a good one too. Business survival rates, right? We got all small businesses in green, and we got breweries in the orange. The brewery survival rate in the United States is unprecedented. The breweries that have been open, up to 8 or 9 years, that 76% of them are still open. That is crazy. But it's a testament to ingenuity, innovation, scrappiness, entrepreneurs and brewery owners' ability to reinvent themselves. Okay, we're back to sober time, unfortunately. Look at that, look at that beer loss. Look at that volume decline. That's traditional beer. Now, when we say traditional beer, that includes craft beer. It does not include beverages that are taxed like beer. So in the United States, hard seltzers are taxed like beer. Flavored malt beverages are taxed like beer. Canned cocktails are not taxed like beer. But this is traditional beer, so it doesn't include FMBs or seltzers. And then this is what we call the alternative adult beverage market. This does include those other beverages. So you can see the shift to seltzers, flavored malt beverages, and canned cocktails, and the decline of traditional beer. Anyone see this movie? Because this is the craft brewing community and the community landscape right now. Everybody making everything all at once. It's chaos in the marketplace. And, we're struggling with that as an association. My core is beer, man. I love beer. I don't love seltzers. I don't know any brewer that's gets up and is like, man, I can't wait to go make that seltzer today, man. The aroma is freaking amazing. But you do what you got to do to stay in business. You do what you got to do to meet your payroll, keep your workers employed, keep their benefits assured. And so we're struggling with that as an association of, should we shift our focus to supporting small and independent business or stay primarily focused on small and independent breweries? We're probably going to land up somewhere in the middle, but it's a conundrum for sure. It's the blurring of the lines. But the younger drinker of beverage alcohol, so much more educated, so much different than maybe say some of us in this room came into our early legal drinking age adulthood. People are drinking basically the same amount of alcohol in the United States. They're just drinking it differently. And that's that channel shift I talked about. People went from drinking, primarily, especially in craft, on-premise, the bar, the restaurant. COVID comes along, poof, everybody drinks beer and drinks beverage alcohol at home. That home trend, that channel shift has still stayed with us post-COVID. That's part of that new normal that I've been talking about, and finding ways to connect with the beer drinker that way. Health and wellness playing into this big time with the younger drinker in the United States. Dry January. They're just a lot different. They're a lot more promiscuous. We like to say that, the average craft beer drinker is what we call a cross drinker. They'll drink anything. They'll drink everything. They'll drink craft beer. They'll drink liquor. They'll drink wine. Now they're drinking maybe seltzers. Now they're drinking canned cocktails. So it's an interesting time for sure. We have to find new occasions to help our members. Our friends in the liquor industry have done this great. They have stolen, usurped, maybe that's a better word, occasions that historically were primarily meant for beer. The best example I can give is if you go to a sporting event in the United States and you look at what's available to drink at the event, especially at a baseball stadium. Baseball and beer, man, that's like apple pie in America. That goes together. Well, you go to a baseball stadium in the United States now, man, you can get a mixed drink. You certainly can get a canned cocktail, and you absolutely can get a seltzer. And so that's an example of where we have ceded ground. We have to find other ways to try to take back that ground. New customers could be a key to that. This slide is a slide that shows, to me, this slide shows opportunity. Craft beer has the lowest percentage of female drinkers and BIPOC drinkers on this graph. I don't know how much that holds true here for all of you in Australia, but that is a keen area of focus for the Brewers Association and our members, putting resources into finding how we can develop programs and projects that can help our members do better with those beer drinking communities. Again, I think it's an opportunity, not a threat. So, as I work to the end, we have to rise to the opportunity. You have to look at it as an opportunity. We've done this before. Craft brewing has done this before. There was the first shakeout in the 90s that I talked about. Some people didn't make it through. Those that did reinvented themselves, came out the other side stronger. The same thing happened during COVID. Now the same thing is going to happen here again. But we have to find ways to do better, be more relevant, find new occasions, find new opportunities, and find new drinkers. And with that, I say I hope to see all of you in Las Vegas at the Craft Brewers Conference next April, and enter the World Beer Cup. And I'll see everyone tonight at the Indies. Cheers.
We do have time for a few questions. Does anybody have a question for Bob? Just put your hand up so we can get a microphone to you. Anyone? Just over here. Rich? Where's Rich?
Could you just talk a little bit about some of the technical advisory work the BA has done and kind of what role the BA has as a technical advisor to breweries?
Yeah, very happy to expand upon that again, about that. Very proud of the work we've done in that. We have a technical committee. They gather each year and debate and educate and talk about what resources we should develop that member breweries need to have to make better beer or maybe operate a safer brewery. One of the things we have done in that area is we contracted with a gentleman to become what we call our safety ambassador. His name is Matt Stinchfield. He wrote the book we just released on safety. Brewery safety, super important. People die in breweries, okay? Breweries, it's a manufacturing job. It's risky. The number of American craft breweries that don't know that, closed-toed shoes, eyeglasses, long pants are essential. So that would be one example. We had another gentleman that we focused on draft beer quality. Draft beer quality all over the map, right? Are you using CO2? Are you using the right kind of gas? How often do you clean your draft lines? We contracted with a gentleman to become our draft beer quality ambassador. Travels around the country, around the states, speaks to different state associations about draft beer quality. So those are two examples I would cite. We just recently released a tool that we're very proud of. It's called our water risk assessment tool. No water, no beer, right? Water issues becoming more and more, and climate change becoming more and more acute, more and more important. You can go on the Brewers Association website and determine, based on geography, where you are, what risks you have to assuring that you have a clean and quality water supply to make your beer. And then finally, another thing that we do is, and we've done this for over a decade, and this came from Ken Grossman, is we fund research for hop quality and malt quality primarily that brewers will be able to use 3, 5, 10 years down the road. So super proud of all the work we do in our quality department. How did I do, Chris? Blessed by the man.
Kylie's looking very jealous at those resources you have to throw at those
Hey man, it comes from the members primarily though, right? We don't have that expertise staff-wise. Chris had it because he owned and operated a brewery, and we have another guy who leads our technical department, Chuck Skypeck. He did the same, but I don't have that technical knowledge. But the member breweries, the people in this room, they have the knowledge.
We've probably got time for one more message, one more question.
You talk about recruitment, or you said new occasions, but recruitment, and obviously alcohol across the board in Australia is having less recruitment of 18 to 21s. We can drink at 18. But one of the pressures we've got is advertising, and a lot of pressure. It's like we've seen our cigarette industry, remove all advertising, plain packaging, and there's a lot of people in the lobby groups who would like to see that with alcohol. Have you faced the same pressure with alcohol advertising and sort of anti-alcohol lobby groups?
Short answer is no. Best example I can point to there is the main reason the liquor industry has, exploded in the last 20 years in the United States is for decades they were prohibited from advertising. Hard liquor was not allowed to be on television, be on billboards. That moratorium ended somewhere around 2005, I think, and that has given rise to their success, their growth. Now, that said, there is no doubt there is a global anti-alcohol movement afoot. The World Health Organization, go on their website and check it out. And it's a real threat. And I think we're seeing it more, get a foothold maybe in Europe more than it is in the United States. But the Brewers Association is part of an organization called the Worldwide Brewing Alliance. The IBA could join that. It's free. And it's led by some really sharp people that are hoping to try to work with policymakers globally. So in the United States, in Europe, at the World Health Organization, probably in Australia as well, to work with policymakers on how we can educate them on what is responsible and safe levels of alcohol consumption. And this is an opportunity for beer, right? Because beer is the alcohol beverage in moderation. Less ABV in beer than wine and than liquor. So you tell the policymakers, hey, Jean-Pierre, people are still going to drink, but let's steer them towards beer, which is 3%, 5%, 6%, and away from 40% alcohol, and we'll all have a positive outcome, and beer maybe can grow. So it's an opportunity. We see that as an opportunity for beer. So we're heavily engaged in that.
We might be able to dig into that a little bit deeper with the Beer Australia panel that's coming up after the break in the keynote speakers room presented by Alpha Laval. Big round of applause to Bob Pease.
Thank you.